The game that started this quest was The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. This game got me back into Zelda after 10 years of no longer being a fan of the series anymore. So I wanted to start YouTube for a while, but I wasn't sure how. It wasn't until I was on the Nintendo Wii U eShop, they had just announced that they were going to shut it down, so I figured I'd go on there, see if they're having a we're shutting the store down type of sale. But I'm on there, and that's when an idea came to me a lot faster than your sister does when I text her. Why don't I just beat every mainline Zelda game? Now, the multiplayer games, the spin-off games, the CDI games, I'd worry about those later, but I could get started just beating the single-player games. See, it's funny because I had not followed up with the series for about 10 years, I would say. I didn't play any of the new games, I didn't follow up with any of the stuff, the timeline came out, I didn't care at all. But it wasn't until I played The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild that I got back into the series. That game rekindled my love for this series that when I was a kid it was so special to me and it meant so much to me. And a lot of the recent growth that my channel has been experiencing has been because of me covering Zelda content. So much like how Link, Zelda, and Ganondorf are tied to each other in Hyrule, so too is my fate forever tied to the Legend of Zelda series. Judging by the reception of the game, it's fair to say my initial experience was like most people's, full of fun and excitement. Exploration was the name of the game, and Nintendo had built a Hyrule that was less going from point A to point B, and more exploring and playing around in an open world sandbox. When gamers first played this game, they felt very much like I did when I went from sleeping with virgins to MILFs. It felt like now I really had the space to play around. But had this game been a woman, I would have finished it off instead of doing everything but that. And if I had beat it when I originally played it, I would have summed the game up as fun, exciting, and rewarding. It wasn't until I played through it again on Switch where my perception of the game really did change. And now a lot of people say Breath of the Wild, it was a breath of fresh air for the Legend of Zelda series. And I agree. It's just too bad it was short on breath. Let's start off with the things I liked about the game. I will say, right off the bat, this is a solid game. It is a fun, exciting game. But it's not the masterpiece people make it out to be. It's not as overrated as Wind Waker, because Breath of the Wild's praises actually have some substance. And after playing through twice, I will say there are things I loved about the game in both playthroughs. I loved fighting the Hinox, Talus, Lynels, and Moldugas. These are the mini-bosses, and they're far stronger than the normal enemies you encounter. You have to think of them as like the high-end escorts. You know, the young, fresher ones, the ones that basically keep taking away all my older sister's best clients. I will say though, this is the funnest part of the game, at least to me. Just going around the map, fighting mini-boss enemies, it's a lot of fun. It's just, Zelda games have such a rich catalog of enemies that you could basically make like a Shadow of the Colossus type Monster Hunter game with just Zelda enemies. Or just do what Hyrule Warriors did and just, just copy another game style. We could have like Zelda Kart, Zelda Super Smash Sisters, that'd be so cool. Or what about like Elder Scrolls Hyrule, or Lego Zelda Avengers. Yeah. Nah, calm your Deku nuts, I'm just fucking around. Another thing I liked was the open world. Much like my grade 11 math teacher, Hyrule was put together in a way that would make a Calabrese man scream, "Strafiga!" Traversing the world is a lot of fun. In both my playthroughs, I did every shrine, mostly because I wanted the fast travel locations, but it's just fun exploring the world, and, you know, why not just go explore every location and just get everything before you move on to the side quests and everything. But yeah, just the open world, it was done great here. And I wanted to bring this up. I don't believe Breath of the Wild was the first open world Zelda game. Just hear me out. I mean, if anything, you could argue A Link Between Worlds was, but everyone says the Grand Theft Auto games are open world, even though for pretty much most of the 3D games, regions are story locked, just like in Zelda games. So if it's the same idea and the same concept, you can't really say one's open world and the other one isn't, you know what I mean? Plus, wouldn't the original Legend of Zelda technically be open world? Breath of the Wild was just the first Zelda game to have a huge, cohesive map with tons of shit to do and find. Fun fact, I never used a horse in the game. I had so much fun just exploring and traversing the open world. This is one of those few games where you could just spend hours exploring the open world, doing stupid shit and not doing a single thing of real storyline significance, but still just have like the time of your life. Again, a really, really fun game, and I think just the way that Hyrule was built and your ability to travel and everything, it just makes it so much fun. My favorite thing though just might be the Fierce Deity costume. I grew up playing the N64 games, so I love this. Originally, to get the mask, you pretty much needed to 100% the game. Now, 100%ing Majora's Mask is a pain in the ass. And look at me. You think that was easy for me as a kid? Just sitting there, wearing an overgrown Spider-Man sweater as like a blanket, drunk and shit? Now, I love it because Fierce Deity does not show up in enough Zelda games. There's no backstory, no information, nothing. I think they should just bring him back, make him a villain or something, but who knows. For normal people though, you can dress up as other Links and like other shit, but who really cares? I do think Breath of the Wild had good ideas, but it had poor execution, much like Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 3. It's unfortunate because this game laid such a great foundation for future Zelda games, but it just fell short in execution in so many ways, which is a shame because that was highly avoidable. My first complaint is probably the most common complaint you will hear about Zelda games: menu surfing. Now everyone complained about Ocarina of Time, the water temple. You know it. You have to pause the game, change your boots, pause the game, change your boots. It was annoying. Nobody liked it. Yet in this game, people have no problem doing it. Now, I will say, changing your sword, your shield, your bow, your equipment, it's like, okay, that makes sense. But this is a good microcosm for the whole game. The good is eclipsed by the bad. In this case, clothing. There's clothes for just about everything, whether it's climbing, combat, swimming, sneaking, being hot, being cold. There's like 64 reasons to equip different things. Now, if the people who made this game had gone to post-secondary school or maybe read books by actual authors and not some asshole with access to spell check, they would have had the common sense to give you the ability to run faster, climb faster, sneak better, deal more damage via abilities or upgrades to Link himself. That way you don't have to pause the menu and surf through it like every 3 minutes. It's like, oh, it's cold outside, gotta change my clothes. Oh, there's an enemy, gotta change my clothes. Oh, I gotta climb something, which is 50% of the game. It's like, I gotta change my clothes. I'm gonna save the game, I gotta change my clothes. Oh, my friends are coming over, I gotta change my clothes. Like, oh my god, this game was made by people who think that every day is Halloween. Another annoying ass thing about the game is a hot-cold mechanic. For those of you who don't know, there are areas in this game where it's either too hot or too cold for you to just traverse normally. And a lot of people defend this mechanic. But if these little freaks had played a game where this mechanic was done well, they wouldn't be defending it here. It doesn't add to the difficulty, it doesn't add any level of challenge, storytelling, exploration, nothing. It's just a feature that adds nothing to the game. All it does is slow you down. It's like, oh, it's hot or it's cold. It's like, now I gotta stop everything I'm doing and either equip something, or you have to make sure that you have the right ingredients so you could just cook something that's gonna give you a temporary buff. Again, it adds nothing to the gameplay experience, it just slows you down. Now, if the people who made this game, if they could solve the mystery of 2 plus 2, because you have to keep in mind, these people can subtract 0 from a number and not know what the answer is, okay? Like, if they did, they would have just made the whole hot-cold thing, they would have got rid of it. You know what they would have done? You know what they should have done? What they should have done is just made select areas that are hot or cold. For example, imagine if there was a dungeon that was like inside a volcano, so you had to find ways to deal with the heat, either in the game or something. Or an area that's really cold, so you have to keep a fire lit, or you have to light up areas so you don't freeze to death. Something that adds challenge, that's memorable, not just like, oh, now I have to cook something so I can go explore. It's like, it's so counterintuitive to exploration. That was the whole thing, remember? The look up when the game came out was all about, like, you can explore, you can go anywhere, you can explore. Then you go to do it, and then it's like, oh, it's too cold. Oh, you don't have a winter jacket? Oh, you don't know where to buy a winter jacket in the game? Guess you're gonna freeze, asshole. Then it's like, oh, the game tells you, maybe you should go check out the desert. So you go to the desert, oh, it's too hot. Oh, you don't have your dress on? Well, you're gonna burn. It's like, again, it doesn't add anything. It's an inconvenience, and it's annoying. Should have been done in select areas where you could have used your abilities, your intelligence. There would have had to been a gimmick, something that would have made it memorable and challenging. But the way the hot-cold mechanic is now, it's a pain in the ass. People get mad at me about this next point, but you have to remember, you are wrong. So a lot of freaks defend this, much like my previous point, but I say to them, if you had played something where this was done well, you wouldn't be defending this weapon breaking mechanic in Breath of the Wild. It sucks here. And I'm not complaining that it aged poorly, I'm complaining about how out of date it was when it came out. Morrowind came out in 2002. Breath of the Wild came out like, what, 2018, 2017, like 15 years later? Even the repair mechanic from Fallout 3, which came out in 2008, 2009, around there, still ahead of this game. And it's like, those were acceptable for the time. They were acceptable for the time. This came out in 2017, 2018. It's not acceptable, okay? Your weapons break. You can't fix them. You can't replace them. You can't buy them. You can't craft them. No, okay, no, okay? When this game came out, that is unacceptable, okay? This is unacceptable, people. You have to learn to accept that this is unacceptable. Have standards for yourself. What's wrong with you people? It saddens me that Zelda fans are becoming more like Final Fantasy fans, where they'll just accept any nonsense and just praise it. And it's like, no, do better for yourself, because I want these games to be better, okay? Now, I know what you're thinking. Al, you sit there, you act like you know everything, you're stupid. But what kind of ideas do you have? Again, just copy the mechanic from another game because people won't care, okay? Let me be able to fix stuff, to craft stuff. Do what Monster Hunter does, where your weapon's dull. A Lionel, for example, okay? A Lionel. Why do Lionel swords break in this game? It's because the people who made this game ate glue as children, and it slowed their brains down, because if it didn't, if their brains worked normally, they would have had a way for you to craft weapons, to fix weapons, whatever. Like a Lionel sword should not break. Maybe the more I use it, it just dulls, and I gotta go to some idiot, I gotta pay him to sharpen it, or I can get a whetstone and I can use an item, or maybe I have another one that's dull and I can combine them to just break one, but now I have another one that's at full health. Like, come on, people! Like, every other game for like 2 decades, that's 20 years, that's a lot of days. I'm not good at math. But it's like, had been doing this mechanic better. This was a terribly done mechanic for this game at the time it came out, and I will never change my mind on this, and you have to accept that you were wrong about this. The weapon breaking mechanic in this game sucks. This next point makes a lot of people mad, but you have to remember they can go fuck themselves. So people get mad when I complain about the combat in this game, which I know is a bit weird because I was just complimenting the mini-boss combat. But much like everything else in this game, the good is always outweighed by the bad. Fighting the mini-bosses in this game is a lot of fun. I love fighting the mini-bosses, like I said. The regular enemies, though, that's just... I don't know what they did. Why did they do this? Why did they do this to me? In case you don't know, the people who made this game, you see, their mothers, while pregnant, took no care of themselves whatsoever. And the result is this. So, let me sum up what combat is in this game against regular enemies. You run up to them, you hit them 2-3 times, they go flying away, then you chase after them, and it's the same thing. The more combat you do in this game, the longer it takes, because enemies level up. My fellow Bethesda fans, for over 20 years we've been bitching about the difficulty in Bethesda games. Why? Because when you make the game harder, what does it do? The enemies just take and deal more damage. It doesn't really add more difficulty. They're not smarter, they don't do like complex maneuvers or anything, it's just... oh, they just take a bit more damage, and then, yeah, you have better weapons, so it's like, it all cancels itself out. Like, all they had to do was just keep the weak enemies weak, but their strength comes from their numbers. Like, GoldenEye 64 came out 20 years before this game, and did the whole difficulty thing better with 007 mode. You can make the enemies a lot more accurate, you can increase their damage, their health, blah blah blah. That was 20 years before this game, and they did it better. Just like every other game that has a similar mechanic to Breath of the Wild that's like 10 to 20 years older than it has done it better. All they had to do is just a small group of enemies. Yeah, you could take them out, but maybe there's a bunch of them, and the more of them you beat, instead of just giving them more health, because the damage doesn't matter, because you hit them, they go flying. You hit the other guy, he goes flying. You hit the other guy, he goes flying. Then whichever one comes running up to you, you hit them 2 or 3 more times, they go flying away, then the next guy. It's like a really shitty action movie in like a 80s TV show, where it's like nobody wants to get hurt and they don't have any padding, so it's just like, oh, and the guy goes, and flies away, and it's like, it's boring. I'm just watching shitty 80s television when I should be playing a Zelda game. The last thing I would change would have just been the final boss. Now, the first round, it was great. It was a lot of fun. And the second round, you just ride a horse around and just shoot at openings on Great Beast Ganon. It's not that fun. I would have just either got rid of the second part because it sucked and it just ruined the fact that the first part was so much fun. Or I would have just done like an old school Final Fantasy thing. Just have 2 or 3 rounds with the final boss, and they should have just made it that you have to implement different strategies. There's like different things you have to do, because it's like, oh, maybe Ganon, the first fight, he does certain moves, different attacks, blah blah blah. Second fight, maybe he's Ganondorf, and he does different things. So it just feels like the fight is evolving. It feels like, okay, he's not going to be doing the same moves. Like it ramps up, and it feels exciting. It feels like a nice final boss, a nice final fight. And you don't get that, which is unfortunate, because imagine if you start the game up, you go straight to Ganon, and it's just like, you have a really good boss fight, and then it just feels like the game just handed you the ending, and it's just... It's unfortunate that the people who made this game went to blow their nose and accidentally self-lobotomized themselves, because they clearly lacked the brain power to just end the game strong, and then you get a little cinematic at the end, but it's like, who gives a shit? There's no story in this game. You just free some people that were trapped by Ganon, which is optional. So it's like the whole ending is just... doesn't matter. It just didn't feel like I was doing anything in this game. Like, there was no story, everything was just optional, so it's like the only important thing is fighting Ganon, and it's just like, the first round is fun, but then the second half just sucks, and it's like, you get nothing in terms of a story at the end. There's just nothing. The game just falls flat. Again, it came out, everybody loved it, and yeah, it was a lot of fun and everything, but, you know, all this time later, like, why can't we just admit that this isn't the masterpiece we thought it was when it first came out? So that's the good, the bad, and the ugly of it all. Now, when it comes to the music, side quest, and graphics, I was pretty indifferent to it. I tend to listen to my own music for the most part when I'm playing through games, unless it's story heavy or whatever, so I didn't really listen to too much in this game. The side quests, there are a few highlights, but overall, they're only worth doing because they're just going to show you locations or give you ingredients, so not bad, but nothing really great, or any side quest where I felt, oh, I should replay that next time or recommend to people. And then the graphics, it's Nintendo Switch. Don't expect anything too crazy. Don't expect it to look like it's the Fox engine or anything. Also, on a second playthrough, because replayability is a big thing for me, on a second playthrough I found that, you know, a lot of that fun and excitement and the mystery of exploration was lost. Now that I knew where pretty much everything was, it felt less like, oh, what's around the corner? And it's just like, oh yeah, this thing's here, or that thing's there. It's like, you know what I mean? It's like the power of the punch that this game had, it's really just lost in a second playthrough. And I think it's a great sort of analogy that this game is a lot like a boxer who, yeah, maybe in the first round he comes out swinging and he's hard hitting, but it's like after a while he's just gassed, and it's like, oh, you know, there's not really much to keep the whole train going after a while. Nowadays, you mostly turn this game on to chip away at 100%, or show your friends how much time you wasted by how much stuff you collected and equipment you improved. Much like the crack cocaine epidemic of the 80s, Breath of the Wild was overly successful because people were fucked up on drugs. Kids, don't do drugs, and don't play Breath of the Wild either. Which, honestly, it's a shame. This is a good game, it's a solid game, it's a fun game. But it was also remade as Tears of the Kingdom, so that basically nullified the need to play this game. It's not really worth replaying because anything and everything you can do, you could just do in one playthrough. Everything you see, like, it's all, yeah, just one playthrough, you can one and done it. There's no point in replaying it, there's really no point in recommending it, and there's no point in paying more than $20 for it. So, if you're going to beat every Zelda game, that's probably the only reason you have to play it, or maybe you got it for free or something, or maybe you're on drugs and you want to play a game made by people whose brains are as equally fried as yours. And last thing, ranking the game. So what I want to do at the end of each of these videos is rank the Zelda games that I've beat on the channel. Seeing how this video is just the beginning of it and there's only one game, I'm obviously not going to rank it. But just so you know how it's going to go, the top of the list is going to be the game I enjoyed the most, I liked the most, you could argue would probably be my favorite, but the one at the bottom will be the one that I enjoyed the least, my most hated one, however you want to word it. No bullshits, no tricks, no tomfoolery, nothing. I'm not putting a tier list, I'm not saying objectively this is any sort of list, this is the best, this is the worst, blah blah blah. No. The one I liked, at the top, we go down from there to the one I hated the most. Very simple stuff. It is what it is. Not meant to upset anybody or whatever, but it's just going to be reflective of my experiences with the game. So, this game, like I said, can't really rank it amongst itself, just put it in the middle of a list. There we go. Like I said though, moving forward, I would love to cover the multiplayer games, but I need to get the people and the hardware, you know, recording equipment, blah blah blah. Would like to do the CDI games, but I gotta get a CDI. I don't really know how easy that would be or whatever. But that's what I thought of Breath of the Wild. I think it's a good game, but it really has no longevity. I feel like its legacy will be that of a band that was a one-hit wonder, only for a couple years later to have a more famous band cover their only hit, and that's the one that everybody thinks of, which is a shame. But that's Breath of the Wild. Next time I will be covering Link's biggest, littlest adventure yet, The Legend of Zelda: The Minish Cap, aka Little Big Hyrule. So like, comment, subscribe, and put your goddamn pants back on. The video's over.